David thought he was losing his mind when he opened his electric bill that Tuesday morning. He stared at the numbers, blinked hard, and looked again. $347 for 1 month. In a tiny 2-bedroom townhouse where he lived alone. Just 3 months ago, his bills were running around $120. David was the kind of guy who unplugged his coffee maker when he left for work and turned off lights religiously. He'd been an electrical engineer for 15 years, so he knew exactly how much power his appliances used. Something was definitely wrong. David lived in Meadowbrook Gardens, one of those planned communities where every house looked almost the same, and the homeowners association had rules for everything. The kind of place where you couldn't paint your front door the wrong shade of blue without getting a nasty letter. He'd moved there 2 years ago after his divorce, looking for something simple and quiet. Most days he got exactly that. The first thing David did was walk through his house, checking every single appliance. He pulled out his multimeter and started testing things. The refrigerator was running normally, the water heater was fine. His computer setup in the spare bedroom wasn't drawing any unusual power. Even his old washing machine was behaving itself. He called the electric company the next day, figuring maybe their meter was broken. The customer service rep was polite but not very helpful. She told him they could send someone out to check the meter, but there would be a $75 service charge if nothing was wrong with it. David scheduled the appointment anyway. While he waited for the meter inspection, David started paying closer attention to his house. He was naturally curious about problems, especially electrical ones. It was part of his job to figure out why things weren't working the way they should. So every evening after work, he'd walk around his property looking for anything unusual. That's when he noticed something odd about his outdoor electrical outlet. David's townhouse was on the corner of the development, which meant he had a side yard that most of the other units didn't have. There was an outdoor outlet on that sidewall, the kind contractors use when they're working outside. David had used it a few times to plug in his electric leaf blower or string trimmer, but lately, the outlet cover looked different somehow. On Thursday evening, David crouched down next to the outlet and examined it more closely. The cover was slightly askew, like someone had been using it and hadn't put it back quite right. There were also some scuff marks in the dirt nearby, as if someone had been walking around there regularly. David felt a strange prickle of suspicion. Who would be using his outlet? And why? He decided to keep an eye on things. Friday night, he made himself a cup of coffee and sat by his living room window, which gave him a good view of the side yard. He felt a little silly, like he was spying on his own property, but the mystery was bothering him. Around 11:30, David saw movement outside. Someone was walking across his side yard carrying something. In the dim light from the street lamp, he could just make out a figure dragging what looked like an extension cord. David's heart started beating faster. Someone was definitely using his electricity without permission. He wanted to go outside right then and confront whoever it was, but something held him back. Maybe it was better to figure out exactly what was going on first. The next morning, David went outside to investigate. Sure enough, there were fresh footprints in the soft dirt around his outlet. He followed the trail and discovered something that made his stomach drop. The footprints led straight to his neighbor's driveway, where a shiny white Tesla was parked. His neighbor Rebecca was someone David had tried to avoid since moving in. She was the self-appointed queen of the homeowners association, always walking around with a clipboard and measuring people's grass height or checking if their trash cans were the regulation distance from the street. She'd given David 3 violation notices in his first month for things like having his newspaper on the driveway too long and parking his car 6 inches over his designated spot. Rebecca seemed to think she was personally responsible for maintaining property values in Meadowbrook Gardens. She'd knock on doors to remind people about association rules and send long emails to the HOA board about compliance issues. Most of the neighbors just rolled their eyes and tried to stay out of her way. But now it looked like Rebecca was stealing David's electricity to charge her expensive car. David spent Saturday morning doing some calculations. Tesla batteries were huge, usually around 75 to 100 kilowatt hours. At the local electric rate of about 12 cents per kilowatt hour, A full charge would cost around $9 to $12. If Rebecca was charging her car every night or even every other night, that could easily explain his skyrocketing electric bill. The more David thought about it, the angrier he got. Rebecca was probably saving herself $200 or $300 a month by using his electricity. Meanwhile, she was walking around the neighborhood writing violation notices for people who left their trash cans out an hour too long. David decided he needed proof before he did anything. That evening, he set up his phone to record video from his kitchen window. He also made sure his outdoor security light had fresh bulbs so he could see clearly. Sunday night, David got his evidence. At exactly 11:15, Rebecca came out of her house wearing dark clothes and carrying a heavy-duty extension cord. She walked straight to David's outlet, plugged in the cord, and ran it back to her Tesla. The whole operation took her less than 3 minutes. David felt a mix of anger and satisfaction as he watched the recording. He finally had proof of what Rebecca was doing, but he also felt frustrated. What was he supposed to do now? Call the police? Talk to the HOA board that Rebecca practically controlled? Monday morning brought another unpleasant surprise. David found a violation notice taped to his front door. According to Rebecca's official HOA letterhead, his garden hose was improperly stored and needed to be moved within 48 hours to avoid a fine. David looked at his garden hose, which was neatly coiled next to his front steps exactly where it had been for 2 years. He crumpled up the notice and threw it in his trash can. The woman was stealing his electricity and had the nerve to complain about his garden hose. That evening, David watched Rebecca's routine again. She was clearly comfortable with what she was doing, moving quickly and efficiently. This wasn't something that had just started. She'd probably been stealing his power for months, maybe even since she got the Tesla. David tried to remember when Rebecca had bought her car. It was definitely sometime last spring, maybe April or May. His electric bills had started climbing around that same time, but he'd assumed it was just seasonal changes, or maybe his aging air conditioning system working harder. As David sat in his dark kitchen watching Rebecca unplug her car Tuesday morning before dawn, he realized she'd been stealing from him for at least 6 months. That meant she'd probably taken several $100s worth of electricity, maybe more. The worst part was how brazen she was about it. Rebecca acted like she owned the whole neighborhood, constantly telling other people what they could and couldn't do. She'd literally lectured David about community standards and property values, while secretly stealing his electricity every single night. David knew he had to do something, but he wasn't sure what. He'd never been good at confrontation, preferring to solve problems with logic and engineering rather than arguments. But this situation was different. Rebecca was stealing from him, and she needed to be stopped. Wednesday morning, David made his decision. He was going to talk to Rebecca directly and give her a chance to make things right. Maybe she'd be reasonable about it. Maybe she'd agree to pay him back and start using her own electricity. Deep down, though, David suspected this wasn't going to be as simple as he hoped. David spent all of Wednesday thinking about how to approach Rebecca. He practiced different ways to start the conversation while he sat at his desk at work. He wanted to be polite but firm. Maybe she didn't realize how much money she was costing him. Maybe once he explained the situation, she'd be embarrassed and offer to pay him back. By the time David got home Wednesday evening, he'd convinced himself this could work out peacefully. He'd printed out copies of his electric bills and some photos he'd taken of the extension cord running from his outlet to her driveway. The evidence was clear, and Rebecca seemed like a smart woman. Surely she'd see reason. David walked across the small strip of grass between their townhouses and knocked on Rebecca's front door. He could hear a television playing inside and footsteps approaching. When the door opened, Rebecca stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, looking annoyed at being interrupted. "What do you want, David?" Rebecca asked, not bothering to hide her irritation. She'd never been particularly friendly toward him, but tonight she seemed especially cold. "Hi, Rebecca. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to talk to you about something important. Do you have a few minutes?" Rebecca glanced back into her house, then stepped outside and pulled the door mostly closed behind her. "Make it quick, I'm in the middle of watching something." David took a deep breath. I've been having some issues with my electric bill lately. It's been much higher than normal, and I finally figured out why. He pulled out one of the FIO, showing the extension cord. I have some pictures here that show someone's been using my outdoor outlet to charge a car. Rebecca barely glanced at the photo. So? Well, the cord leads to your Tesla. I was hoping we could work something out. Maybe you could start using your own electricity, or we could figure out a way to split the cost fairly. Rebecca's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked bored. David, those outdoor outlets are part of the common area utilities. As the HOA compliance coordinator, I have the authority to use community resources for legitimate purposes. David felt his stomach drop. Community resources? Rebecca, that outlet is connected directly to my electrical panel. It's not a common area utility. It's part of my unit. According to the HOA covenants, all outdoor electrical fixtures in the development are considered shared infrastructure, Rebecca said, crossing her arms. I've reviewed the documents thoroughly. David knew she was lying. He'd read his HOA agreement cover to cover when he bought the house. There was nothing about shared electrical fixtures. The outdoor outlet was clearly labeled on his electrical panel, and he'd been paying for its usage since day one. Rebecca, I don't think that's correct. The outlet is on my property and connected to my electric meter. I've been paying for all the electricity you've been using to charge your car. My bills have gone up by over $200 a month. Rebecca's tone turned condescending. David, I understand you're new to living in a managed community, but you can't just make up rules as you go along. The HOA board has full authority over common area maintenance and utilities. But this isn't a common area utility, David insisted, feeling his patience starting to slip. Look, I have my electric bills here. You can see exactly when the usage started increasing. It matches up perfectly with when you got your Tesla. Rebecca glanced at the papers in David's hand but didn't take them. I'm not going to look at your personal financial documents. That's inappropriate. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. Inappropriate? Rebecca, you've been stealing my electricity for months. I'm trying to work this out reasonably, but you're costing me hundreds of dollars. I'm not stealing anything, Rebecca snapped. And I don't appreciate your accusation. You're harassing an HOA board member, which is a violation of community guidelines. I'm not harassing anyone. I'm trying to have a conversation about something that's affecting my finances. Rebecca stepped back toward her door. This conversation is over. If you continue to bother me about this, I'll have to file a formal complaint with the board about your behavior. David felt heat rising in his face. My behavior? You're the one taking electricity that doesn't belong to you. I'm using community resources for community purposes, Rebecca said firmly. My role as compliance coordinator requires me to patrol the neighborhood regularly. Keeping my vehicle charged is part of my official duties. David almost laughed at how ridiculous that sounded. Community purposes? Rebecca, you're charging your personal car with my electricity while you sleep. How? Is that a community purpose? I don't have to explain HOA operations to residents, Rebecca said, her voice getting louder. If you have a problem with how the association is managed, you can file a complaint through proper channels. Fine, David said, trying to keep his voice level. I'll take this up with the HOA board then. Rebecca smiled coldly. Good luck with that. She went back inside and closed the door firmly, leaving David standing on her front step. David walked back to his house feeling frustrated and confused. The conversation had gone nothing like he'd expected. Rebecca hadn't shown even a hint of embarrassment or remorse. Instead, she'd acted like she had every right to use his electricity, and she'd made it clear she had no intention of stopping. Thursday morning, David found a violation notice taped to his front door. According to the official HOA letterhead, his trash can was positioned in violation of community standards and needed to be moved immediately. David looked at his trash can, which was sitting exactly where it always sat, next to his garage door. That evening, there was another notice. This time, Rebecca was complaining about excessive noise from David's air conditioning unit. She claimed other residents had complained, though David knew that was impossible. His AC unit was barely audible, and it was positioned away from his neighbor's windows. Friday brought a third violation notice, this one about David's car being improperly parked. His Honda Civic was sitting squarely in his designated parking space, exactly where it belonged. David realized what was happening. Rebecca was retaliating against him for confronting her about the electricity theft. She was using her position as HOA compliance coordinator to harass him with bogus violation notices. That weekend, David spent hours researching HOA rules and looking up information about utility theft. He learned that stealing electricity was actually a crime in his state, punishable by fines and even jail time. He also confirmed what he already knew. His outdoor outlet was definitely not a common area utility. David also looked up the HOA board members and found something interesting. Rebecca's husband worked at the same law firm as the HOA president. In fact, according to their website, they were business partners. That explained Rebecca's confidence about filing complaints with the board. She probably figured her husband's relationship with the president would protect her. Monday morning brought another surprise. David found Rebecca standing next to his outdoor outlet with a clipboard taking notes. When she saw him watching from his window, she smiled and waved mockingly. That evening, David received an email from the HOA board. Someone had filed a complaint about his hostile and aggressive behavior toward board members. The email said the board would be investigating the matter and that David needed to attend a hearing the following week. David couldn't believe it. Rebecca was actually trying to get him in trouble for asking her to stop stealing his electricity. She was using her HOA position to cover up her theft and punish him for calling her out on it. Tuesday night, David watched from his window as Rebecca went through her usual routine. She walked across his yard like she owned it, plugged in her extension cord and connected it to her Tesla, but this time she took longer than usual. She stood next to David's outlet for several minutes, looking directly at his house. David realized she was taunting him. She knew he was watching, and she wanted him to know that she didn't care. She was going to keep stealing his electricity, and there was nothing he could do about it. Wednesday brought 2 more violation notices. One complained about David's unkempt lawn even though he'd mowed it 3 days ago. The other claimed his outdoor light was too bright and disturbing neighbors. David sat in his living room that evening feeling defeated. He'd tried to handle this reasonably, but Rebecca had made it clear she had no intention of being reasonable. She was protected by her HOA connections, and she was using her position to make his life miserable. But David was an engineer, and engineers were good at solving problems. If he couldn't solve this problem through conversation or official channels, maybe he needed to find a different approach. Maybe it was time to get creative. Thursday night, David watched Rebecca's routine one more time. She was so confident, so casual about what she was doing. She acted like she was untouchable. David started thinking about electrical systems and power protection devices. He started thinking about ways to protect his property from unauthorized use. And slowly, an idea began to form in his mind. If Rebecca wanted to play games, David could play games too. But his games would involve engineering solutions that Rebecca probably hadn't considered. Friday evening, David started researching electrical protection systems online. He had some ideas about how to solve his Rebecca problem, and he was beginning to think that maybe the reasonable approach wasn't the only approach available to him. David spent the weekend preparing for his HOA hearing like he was getting ready for a court case. He printed out 6 months of electric bills, organized his photos of Rebecca using his outlet, and even created a simple chart showing how his electricity usage had increased exactly when Rebecca got her Tesla. He also did some research on Rebecca's husband and the HOA president. Just as he'd suspected, they weren't just business partners. They'd started their law practice together 8 years ago and seemed to handle most of the legal work for several HOA developments in the area. David was starting to understand why Rebecca felt so confident about her position. Monday evening came too quickly. David walked into the community center conference room where HOA meetings were held, carrying a folder full of evidence. 5 board members sat at a long table at the front of the room, with Rebecca sitting in the front row of chairs looking smug and confident. The HOA president, a thin man named Robert Chen, called the meeting to order. We're here tonight to address a complaint filed by Rebecca Martinez regarding hostile behavior from a resident. David, you have 15 minutes to respond to these allegations. David stood up, feeling nervous but determined. Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to start by explaining what actually happened here. He opened his folder and pulled out his electric bills. 3 months ago, I noticed my electricity costs had increased dramatically. After investigating, I discovered that my neighbor has been using my outdoor electrical outlet to charge her personal vehicle without my permission. Robert looked uncomfortable. David, that's a pretty serious accusation. I have evidence, David said, pulling out his photos. These pictures show an extension cord running from my outlet to Rebecca's Tesla. I also have video footage of her plugging in her car at night and unplugging it in the morning. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia, leaned forward. Have you tried talking to Rebecca about this? Directly, yes, I have. When I approached her about the situation, she claimed that outdoor outlets are common area utilities and that she has the right to use them as HOA compliance coordinator. She refused to stop using my electricity or offer any compensation. Rebecca stood up from her chair. That's not what happened at all. David approached me in an aggressive and threatening manner. He accused me of stealing and demanded money from me. When I explained HOA policies to him, he became hostile and started harassing me. David felt his face getting hot. That's completely false. I was polite and reasonable. I even offered to work out a fair arrangement to split the cost. You were standing on my front porch shouting accusations, Rebecca said dramatically. I felt threatened and had to close my door to protect myself. I never shouted at anyone, David said, looking around the room at the board members. Look, this isn't about behavior or harassment. This is about Rebecca using my electricity without permission. She's costing me hundreds of dollars, and when I asked her to stop, she started retaliating with fake violation notices. Robert shifted in his seat. David, can you prove that your outdoor outlet isn't part of the common area utilities? David had been hoping someone would ask that question. He pulled out a copy of his property deed and HOA agreement. According to my deed, that outlet is specifically included in my property boundaries. It's also connected directly to my electrical panel, which means I pay for all electricity used through it. Patricia examined the documents David handed her. These do seem to indicate that the outlet belongs to David's unit. Rebecca looked less confident for the first time. The HOA has authority over all outdoor electrical infrastructure for maintenance and community purposes. But charging your personal car isn't maintenance or a community purpose, David said. It's personal use of my electricity. Robert cleared his throat. This is getting complicated. Rebecca, do you have documentation showing that outdoor outlets fall under HOA authority? Rebecca hesitated. The compliance coordinator position requires regular neighborhood patrols. Keeping my vehicle operational is necessary for performing my duties. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. So you're saying that stealing my electricity is part of your HOA job? I'm not stealing anything, Rebecca snapped, and I object to your continued use of that word. Then what would you call using someone else's electricity without their permission? David asked. The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, Robert spoke up. This is a complex situation that involves both HOA policies and individual property rights. I think we need to table this matter until we can get some legal guidance. David felt frustrated. How much legal guidance do you need? She's using my electricity without permission. That's theft, regardless of what you call it. We need to follow proper procedures, Robert said firmly. In the meantime, I'd suggest that both parties try to work this out amicably. Rebecca smiled. I'm perfectly willing to continue performing my HOA duties as required. David realized the hearing was a waste of time. The board wasn't going to do anything that might upset Rebecca, especially with her husband's connection to Robert. They were going to drag this out and hope David would just give up. After the meeting, David walked to his car feeling defeated. As he was unlocking his door, Patricia approached him. David, can I speak with you privately for a moment? Sure, David said, grateful that at least one board member seemed reasonable. Patricia looked around to make sure no one was listening. I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with how this was handled tonight. Robert is worried about liability issues because of his business relationship with Rebecca's husband. So they're going to let her keep stealing my electricity? I didn't say that, but you might need to find another way to resolve this situation. The board is going to move very slowly on anything involving Rebecca. David nodded. Thanks for being honest with me. Just be careful how you handle this, Patricia said. Rebecca has a lot of influence around here and she doesn't forget when people cross her. As if to prove Patricia's point, David found 2 more violation notices on his door when he got home. One complained about excessive vehicle idling, even though David never left his car running. The other cited him for having unauthorized decorative items in his yard, referring to the small garden gnome his sister had given him as a housewarming. Gift Tuesday brought another violation notice about his mailbox being improperly maintained because it had a small scratch on one side. Wednesday's notice complained about noise violations from his garbage disposal, which he'd used for exactly 30 seconds while washing dishes. David realized Rebecca was planning to bury him in paperwork and fines until he gave up and moved away. Each violation notice came with the threat of escalating fees if the problem wasn't corrected within 48 hours. Thursday evening, David sat at his kitchen table calculating how much money Rebecca had stolen from him. Based on his electric bills and the Tesla's charging requirements, she'd probably taken close to $800 worth of electricity over the past 6 months. Meanwhile, she was threatening to fine him $50 for having a garden gnome in his own yard. That night, David watched Rebecca's routine from his window again. She moved with the same casual confidence, like she didn't have a care in the world. When she finished connecting her car, she looked directly at David's house and gave a little wave. Friday morning brought the worst violation notice yet. Rebecca was claiming that David's air conditioning unit was creating excessive noise and vibration that was disturbing other residents. The notice demanded that he have the unit inspected and repaired within 1 week, or face a $200 fine. David knew his AC unit was perfectly fine. He'd had it serviced just 3 months ago, and it was quieter than most units in the development. Rebecca was just making things up now, trying to cost him as much money and aggravation as possible. That afternoon, David called the HOA management company that handled violations and fines. He explained the situation to a customer service representative and asked about the appeals process. Unfortunately, violation notices issued by compliance coordinators are considered valid unless proven otherwise, the representative told him. You can appeal each notice individually, but there's a $25 fee for each appeal, and the process takes 30 to 60 days. David did quick math in his head. Rebecca had issued him 8 violation notices in 2 weeks. Even if he won every appeal, it would cost him $200 in fees and months of hassle. If he lost any appeals, he'd owe the original fines plus additional penalties. Saturday morning, David woke up to find Rebecca standing in his side yard with a clipboard, taking photos of his outdoor outlet. When she saw him watching from his window, she smiled and took a picture of him too. David realized Rebecca was building some kind of case against him, probably claiming that he was harassing her or interfering with her HOA duties. She was documenting everything to make herself look like the victim. That evening, David did more research on electrical protection systems. He learned about devices that could detect unauthorized usage and respond with power interruptions or surges. Most were designed to protect equipment from thieves or prevent accidental electrocution. The more David read, the more interested he became. If Rebecca wanted to keep using his electricity, maybe he could make that experience less pleasant for her. Maybe he could find a way to protect his property that would encourage her to find another source of power. Sunday night, David watched Rebecca's routine one more time. She was so predictable, so comfortable with what she was doing. She connected her extension cord at exactly 11:15 and disconnected it every morning at 6:30. David started thinking about timing circuits and power monitoring devices. He started thinking about ways to make his outlet less reliable for unauthorized users. And he started thinking that maybe it was time to fight back using the skills that had made him a successful engineer. Rebecca had made it clear that she could use the HOA system to make his life miserable, but David had skills that Rebecca probably didn't understand. He had 15 years of experience solving electrical problems, and Rebecca Martinez was definitely a problem that needed solving. Monday morning, David called in sick to work and spent the day researching electrical supply companies online. He had some shopping to do, and he wanted to make sure he got exactly the right equipment for the job he had in mind. David spent Tuesday morning at Industrial Electric Supply, a warehouse-style store where contractors bought serious electrical equipment. He'd called ahead and explained that he needed help with a power protection system for his property. The sales guy, a grizzled electrician named Bill, was happy to help. "So you're looking to protect an outdoor outlet from unauthorized use?" Bill asked, leading David through aisles of electrical panels and conduit. "Exactly. I've got someone using my power without permission and I want to discourage that behavior." Bill nodded knowingly. "Yeah, we see that more often than you'd think. People stealing power, for RVs, electric cars, all kinds of stuff. Good news is there are several ways to handle it." They walked to a section filled with monitoring devices and protective equipment. Bill pulled a small gray box off the shelf. "This here's a load monitoring relay. It detects when someone's drawing power through the circuit and can trigger a response after a preset time delay." David examined the device. It was about the size of a paperback book with several wire terminals and adjustment knobs. "What kind of response?" "Well, the basic version just sends a signal to an alarm or notification system, but you can also wire it to interrupt power to the circuit." Bill pulled out another device, slightly larger than the first. "This one's more sophisticated. It monitors current draw and can trigger a power interruption if usage exceeds normal parameters." "What about surge protection?" David asked. "I mean, what if I wanted to make sure any unauthorized equipment was protected from power fluctuations?" Bill gave David a curious look. "Most people want to discourage theft, not protect the thief's equipment." David smiled. "I'm trying to be responsible about this. I don't want to damage anyone's property, just encourage them to use their own electricity." "Fair enough. You could install a surge protector that's maybe a little too sensitive for high-draw applications. Electric car chargers pull a lot of current, so they're sensitive to power quality issues anyway." They spent another hour discussing different options. David learned about timing circuits that could create brief power interruptions, monitoring systems that could detect usage patterns, and surge protection devices with adjustable sensitivity levels. The solution David finally settled on was more complex than he'd originally planned. He bought a current monitoring relay, a programmable timer, and a variable surge protector. The system would monitor his outlet for unauthorized usage, wait for a preset time period, then create controlled power fluctuations designed to trigger safety systems and sensitive electronic equipment. "You sure you know what you're doing with all this?" Bill asked as he rang up David's purchase. "Some of this equipment requires an electrical permit if you're modifying your home's wiring." "I'm a licensed electrical engineer," David said, "and I'm not modifying any permanent wiring. This is all going to be removable equipment connected through the existing outlet." Wednesday evening, David spread all his new equipment on his workbench in the garage. He spent 3 hours reading instruction manuals and planning his installation. The system he had in mind would work like this. When someone plugged into his MIME outlet between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., the monitoring relay would detect the current draw. After 30 minutes, the timer would activate the surge protector, which would create brief voltage fluctuations every few minutes. The fluctuations wouldn't be dangerous to people, but they would be annoying to sensitive electronics. Most electric car charging systems had built-in protection that would shut down charging if the power quality was poor. The idea was to make David's outlet unreliable for charging without actually damaging anything. Thursday after work, David started the installation. He ran the monitoring relay sensor around the hot wire feeding his outdoor outlet, then connected the timer and surge protector according to his plan. Everything fit into a weatherproof electrical box that he mounted next to his circuit breaker panel. The trickiest part was programming the timer. David wanted the system to activate only during the hours when Rebecca typically charged her car, and only after she'd been drawing power for a while. He didn't want to interfere with his own legitimate use of the outlet for yard work or other daytime activities. After 2 hours of careful work, David had everything connected and programmed. The system was designed to detect unauthorized nighttime usage and respond with controlled power quality issues that would discourage extended charging sessions. Friday evening, David tested his system using a high-wattage work light to simulate the load from an electric car charger. At 10:30 p.m., he plugged in the light and waited. After exactly 30 minutes, the light started flickering as the surge protector created brief voltage variations. The fluctuations weren't severe enough to damage equipment, but they were definitely noticeable. David felt satisfied with his engineering solution. Rebecca would be able to plug in her extension cord like always. But after 30 minutes, her Tesla's charging system would start experiencing power quality issues. Most electric cars would automatically shut down charging under those conditions to protect their batteries. Saturday and Sunday passed quietly. David didn't see Rebecca outside, and he started wondering if maybe she'd given up on using his electricity. Maybe the HOA hearing had convinced her to find another solution. Monday night, David got his answer. At 11:15 sharp, Rebecca appeared with her extension cord. David watched from his kitchen window as she went through her usual routine, connecting her Tesla to his outlet with practiced efficiency. David checked his phone to note the time, then settled in to wait. His monitoring system would detect the power draw immediately, but the timer wouldn't activate the surge protector until 30 minutes had passed. He wanted to see exactly how his system would perform under real conditions. At 11:45, David's outdoor security light flickered briefly as the surge protector activated. Through his window, he could see Rebecca's Tesla, plugged in and presumably charging normally. The power fluctuations were subtle enough that someone inside a house wouldn't notice them. Over the next hour, David watched as his system created brief voltage variations every few minutes. The fluctuations were small and controlled, designed to trigger protective systems in sensitive electronics without causing any actual damage. Tuesday morning, David woke up early and looked out his window. Rebecca's Tesla was still connected to his outlet, but something was different. Usually, the car's charging indicator light was solid green, showing that it was actively charging. This morning, the light was amber and blinking. David smiled. The blinking amber light meant the car's charging system had detected power quality issues and suspended charging to protect the battery. His system had worked exactly as designed. Around 6:30, Rebecca came outside to disconnect her extension cord. Even from his window, David could see that she looked frustrated. She spent several minutes examining the connection and checking her car's charging port, obviously trying to figure out why her car hadn't charged properly. Wednesday night, Rebecca tried again. This time, David watched more carefully as his system activated. The Tesla started charging normally, but after 30 minutes, the power fluctuations began. Within an hour, the car's charging system shut down with the same blinking amber light. Thursday, morning brought a violation notice on David's door. Rebecca was claiming that his outdoor security light was malfunctioning and creating a disturbance because it was flickering at night. David almost laughed. Rebecca was so focused on harassing him that she didn't realize the flickering was connected to her theft of his electricity. Thursday night, Rebecca's routine was different. Instead of just plugging in her car and going back inside, she stayed outside for several minutes examining David's outlet and the area around it. She was clearly suspicious about the charging problems she'd been having. David watched as Rebecca tested her extension cord connection and even tried plugging in a small device to see if the outlet was working properly. The outlet worked fine for small loads. The power quality issues only occurred when someone tried to draw the high current needed for electric car charging. Friday evening, David decided to check his electric bill online to see if his system was having any effect. His usage for the current month was down significantly compared to recent months. Rebecca's charging sessions were being interrupted, which meant she was getting less stolen electricity and David was saving money. Over the weekend, Rebecca's behavior became more erratic. She tried charging her car at different times, thinking maybe the power quality was better during certain hours. She tried using a different extension cord, thinking maybe her original one was faulty. Nothing worked. Every time she tried to charge for more than 30 minutes, her car's safety systems would shut down the charging process. Sunday night, David watched as Rebecca spent almost an hour trying to get her car to charge properly. She kept unplugging and reconnecting the extension cord, checking connections, and even reading what looked like the car's manual by flashlight. She was clearly frustrated and confused. Monday morning, David found Rebecca standing next to his outdoor outlet with her phone, apparently calling someone for technical support. He could hear her through his window explaining that her Tesla kept stopping its charging cycle and showing error codes. "No, the outlet works fine for other things," Rebecca was saying. "It's just when I try to charge my car that it stops working, after a while." David felt a sense of satisfaction. His engineering solution was working perfectly. Rebecca was still technically able to use his outlet, so she couldn't claim he was blocking her access. But the power quality issues made it impractical for her to steal significant amounts of electricity. Tuesday evening, David upgraded his system slightly. He added a data logger that would record exactly when the monitoring relay detected usage and when the surge protector activated. He wanted detailed records in case Rebecca tried to claim he was interfering with her official HOA duties. Wednesday night, Rebecca tried a new approach. Instead of charging all night, she attempted multiple short charging sessions, unplugging her car every 20 minutes and then reconnecting it. She was trying to avoid triggering David's 30-minute timer. David watched this pathetic display for almost 2 hours. Rebecca would plug in her car, set a timer on her phone, then come back outside 25 minutes later to unplug and immediately reconnect. She was determined to steal his electricity, even if it meant spending her entire evening monitoring the charging process. Thursday morning, David decided it was time to make his system more sophisticated. Rebecca's new strategy was annoying but technically effective. If she was willing to babysit her charging sessions, she could avoid the power quality issues. David spent Thursday evening modifying his timer program. Instead of a simple 30-minute delay, he programmed it to activate after any cumulative usage exceeding 20 minutes within a 2-hour period. Rebecca could still make multiple short connections, but the system would eventually trigger regardless of her timing games. Friday night, Rebecca tried her short session strategy again. For the first hour, everything worked like she expected. But when she plugged in for the 4th time, David's modified system immediately created power fluctuations. Rebecca's car stopped charging within minutes. David could see Rebecca standing next to her Tesla, looking completely bewildered. She'd thought she'd figured out the pattern, but now her car was shutting down even on short charging sessions. Saturday morning, David woke up to find Rebecca examining his electrical meter with a magnifying glass. She was clearly suspicious that David had done something to interfere with her electricity theft, but she couldn't figure out what. The best part was that David's system was completely legal. He wasn't blocking access to his outlet or doing anything that could be considered harassment. He was simply protecting his electrical system from power quality issues, which was a perfectly reasonable thing for a homeowner to do. Rebecca could still plug into his outlet, and she could still steal small amounts of electricity for brief periods. But she couldn't charge her Tesla effectively, which was the whole point. David had found an engineering solution that protected his property without giving Rebecca any legitimate grounds for complaint. As David watched Rebecca walk back to her house in frustration Saturday morning, he felt proud of his technical achievement. Sometimes the best way to solve a people problem was with a good engineering solution. For 3 weeks, David's system worked exactly as designed. Rebecca kept trying to charge her Tesla using his electricity, but her car's safety systems consistently shut down the charging process after detecting power quality issues. David's electric bill dropped back to normal levels, and he felt like he'd finally solved his problem. Rebecca's frustration was obvious. David often saw her outside at night, fiddling with connections and trying different approaches. She'd brought in what looked like an electrician friend to examine her charging setup, but they couldn't find anything wrong with her equipment. The problem wasn't with Rebecca's car or cables. The problem was with David's deliberately unreliable power supply. Things might have continued that way indefinitely, but Rebecca made a critical mistake on a Tuesday night in late October. David was working late in his home office when he heard shouting from outside. Through his window, he could see Rebecca standing next to her Tesla, apparently having an argument on her phone. Her car's charging light was blinking amber again, indicating another failed charging session. "This is ridiculous," Rebecca was yelling into her phone. "I've been dealing with this for weeks. The power keeps cutting out every time I try to charge." David watched as Rebecca angrily unplugged her extension cord and stomped back toward his outlet. Instead of giving up for the night like she usually did, Rebecca started examining his electrical box more closely. She pulled out her phone's flashlight and began looking at the wiring and connections. What Rebecca didn't know was that David had recently upgraded his monitoring system. In addition to the power quality controls, he'd installed a more sophisticated surge protector with multiple protection modes. The newer device was designed to handle larger electrical loads, but it could also create more dramatic power fluctuations when activated. Rebecca plugged her extension cord back into David's outlet with more force than necessary. She was clearly angry and frustrated, and she wasn't being careful about the electrical connections. When she connected her Tesla for what must have been the 6th time that evening, David's monitoring system was ready. The current draw triggered David's timer immediately, since Rebecca had already exceeded the cumulative usage threshold for the evening. But this time, instead of the gentle power fluctuations that usually convinced the Tesla to stop charging, the surge protector activated in full protection mode. David saw his security light flicker violently for several seconds. Through his window, he could see sparks coming from the area around Rebecca's Tesla. Then everything went dark. Rebecca started screaming. David ran outside to see what had happened. Rebecca was standing next to her Tesla, which was no longer connected to the extension cord. The cord itself was smoking slightly, and Rebecca's car was making strange beeping sounds. "What did you do?" Rebecca screamed when she saw David. "Something's wrong with my car." David looked at the Tesla's display screen, which was showing multiple error messages. The charging port looked damaged, and there was a smell of burned electronics in the air. "I didn't do anything," David said, though his stomach was sinking. "What happened?" "Your outlet just surged or something. There were sparks everywhere, and now my car won't start." David realized his protection system had worked too well. Instead of just creating minor power quality issues, the surge protector had apparently delivered a significant electrical event that overwhelmed the Tesla's charging system. "Rebecca, are you hurt? Did you get shocked?" "No, but my car is ruined." Rebecca was frantically pressing buttons on her Tesla's touchscreen, but nothing seemed to be working properly. David spent the next hour helping Rebecca figure out what was wrong with her car. The charging system was completely dead, and several other electrical systems seemed to be malfunctioning. The Tesla would need to be towed to a service center. "This is your fault," Rebecca kept saying. "You did something to your outlet to sabotage my car." "Rebecca, I just have normal surge protection on my electrical system. If there was a power surge, it could have come from anywhere on the grid." But David knew Rebecca was right, even if he couldn't admit it. His protection system had caused the surge that damaged her car. What was supposed to be a gentle discouragement had turned into something much more serious. Wednesday morning, David found 2 police officers at his front door. "Mr. Wilson? We're here about a report of property damage. Your neighbor claims you deliberately damaged her vehicle." David invited the officers inside and explained the situation as carefully as he could. He showed them his electric bills demonstrating that Rebecca had been stealing his electricity, and he explained that he'd installed surge protection equipment to protect his property. "So you're saying this was an accident?" one of the officers asked. "Yes, absolutely. Surge protectors are designed to protect electrical systems from power fluctuations. If Mrs. Martinez's car was damaged, it was an unintended consequence of normal electrical protection equipment." The officers spent an hour examining David's electrical setup and questioning both him and Rebecca. In the end, they determined that while Rebecca's car had definitely been damaged, proving intentional sabotage would be difficult. "Here's the thing," the older officer explained to Rebecca. "Your neighbor has every right to protect his electrical system from unauthorized use. And unauthorized use of someone else's electricity is actually theft of utilities, which is a crime in this state." Rebecca's face went white. "I wasn't stealing anything." I was using community resources for HOA purposes. Ma'am, we've looked at the property boundaries and HOA documents. That outlet belongs to Mr. Wilson's unit. Using it without permission is utility theft, regardless of your HOA position. What followed was the most uncomfortable conversation David had ever witnessed. The police officers explained to Rebecca that she could face criminal charges for stealing electricity, and that her car insurance probably wouldn't cover damage that occurred while she was committing a crime. But he booby-trapped his outlet, Rebecca protested. That's illegal. He installed surge protection equipment on his own property, the officer corrected. That's not illegal. What's illegal is using someone else's electricity without permission. Thursday morning, David received a call from Rebecca's insurance company. They wanted to know about the electrical surge that had damaged her Tesla. David explained about his surge protection system and provided documentation showing that the equipment was installed properly and legally. The insurance investigator was more interested in Rebecca's unauthorized use of David's electricity, so she was stealing Poe. We're from you when this happened. She was using my electricity without permission, yes. That changes things significantly. We'll need to investigate whether coverage applies to damage that occurred during the commission of a crime. Friday brought a visit from the HOA board president, Robert Chen. He looked extremely uncomfortable as he sat in David's living room. David, I need to ask you about this situation with Rebecca. She's claiming you intentionally damaged her car. Robert, I installed standard electrical protection equipment on my own property. Rebecca was stealing my electricity, and when I asked her to stop, she refused. So I protected my electrical system. She says you booby-trapped your outlet. David pulled out the specifications for his surge protection equipment. This is all standard equipment available at any electrical supply store. It's designed to protect property from power surges and unauthorized usage. There's nothing illegal or inappropriate about it. Robert examined the paperwork. David, I have to ask, did you know this might damage her car? David considered his answer carefully. I knew that electric car charging systems are sensitive to power quality issues. The equipment I installed was designed to create power quality problems that would discourage unauthorized usage. I didn't intend to cause permanent damage. But you knew it was possible? Robert, any electrical protection system can potentially cause damage under certain circumstances. That's why they include warning labels and installation instructions. Rebecca chose to ignore those risks when she decided to steal my electricity. The following week brought several interesting developments. Rebecca's insurance company denied her claim, citing the fact that the damage occurred while she was committing theft of utilities. The Tesla Service Center estimated that replacing the damaged battery management system would cost over $14,000. Rebecca also received a citation from the county for theft of utilities. The police had decided to pursue criminal charges after all, partly because Rebecca's theft had been ongoing for months and involved a significant amount of money. But the biggest surprise came when David received a demand letter from Rebecca's husband's law firm. They were threatening to sue David for property damage, claiming his electrical system was designed to cause harm. David took the letter to his own attorney, a sharp woman named Lisa who specialized in property law. After reviewing all the documentation, Lisa was confident about David's position. They don't have a case, Lisa explained. You have the right to protect your property from theft, and you used standard electrical equipment for that purpose. The fact that Rebecca was committing a crime when her car was damaged makes it very difficult for her to recover damages. What about the argument that I deliberately caused the surge? Even if that were true, which would be hard to prove, you were protecting your property from ongoing theft. Property owners have broad rights to prevent unauthorized use of their resources. 3 weeks later, David found himself in small claims court. Rebecca was representing herself, since her husband couldn't ethically represent her in a case where he had a potential conflict of interest through his HOA business relationships. Your Honor, the defendant deliberately sabotaged his electrical outlet to damage my car, Rebecca argued. He installed some kind of device that created a power surge when I tried to charge my vehicle. The judge, a middle-aged man who looked skeptical, examined the evidence both parties had submitted. Ms. Martinez, were you authorized to use Mr. Wilson's electricity? I was performing my duties as HOA compliance coordinator. The association has authority over common area utilities. But according to these property documents, the outlet in question is not a common area utility. It's part of Mr. Wilson's individual unit. Rebecca looked flustered. Well, yes, technically, but... So you were using Mr. Wilson's electricity without his permission? It was for legitimate HOA purposes. The judge turned to David. Mr. Wilson, tell me about this electrical equipment you installed. David explained his surge protection system, emphasizing that it was standard equipment designed to protect property from unauthorized usage and power quality issues. Was this equipment designed to cause damage to vehicles? No, Your Honor. It was designed to create power quality issues that would discourage unauthorized usage. Most electric vehicles have protection systems that shut down charging when they detect poor power quality. The equipment was supposed to make my outlet unreliable for charging, not cause permanent damage. But you knew Ms. Martinez was using your outlet? Yes, sir. I asked her to stop several times, but she refused. Installing the protection equipment was my way of securing my property from continued theft. The judge spent several minutes reviewing the technical specifications David had provided for his electrical equipment. Finally, he looked up. Ms. Martinez, you've admitted to using Mr. Wilson's electricity without permission for several months. That constitutes theft of utilities under state law. Mr. Wilson had every right to protect his property from your unauthorized use. But he destroyed my car. Mr. Wilson installed standard electrical protection equipment on his own property. The fact that this equipment caused damage to your vehicle while you were committing theft is unfortunate, but it doesn't create liability on Mr. Wilson's part. The judge ruled in David's favor and dismissed Rebecca's claim for damages. He also ordered Rebecca to pay David $1,200 in restitution for the electricity she had stolen, based on David's documentation of increased usage. After the hearing, David felt a mixture of relief and guilt. He was glad the legal nightmare was over, but he still felt bad about the damage to Rebecca's car, even though she'd brought it on herself. 6 months later, Rebecca and her husband moved out of Meadowbrook Gardens. David heard through neighborhood gossip that they'd had trouble with their mortgage after paying for the Tesla repairs and legal fees from Rebecca's utility theft conviction. The new HOA compliance coordinator was a retired teacher named Helen, who focused on actual community issues rather than harassment campaigns. David's violation notices stopped completely. David kept his electrical protection system in place, though he adjusted it to be less aggressive. He never had another problem with electricity theft, and his bills remained at normal levels. Looking back, David realized the whole situation could have been avoided if Rebecca had just been reasonable when he first approached her. Instead, her arrogance and abusive power had cost her thousands of dollars and ultimately forced her to leave the community. Sometimes, David reflected, the best way to deal with a bully is to use your brain instead of your fists. Engineering. Solutions aren't always perfect, but they can be very effective when people refuse to behave reasonably.